Today I'll be covering Dvaita Vedanta, also known as Tattvavada, the philosophy of Madhvacharya. Dvaita begins by dividing reality into two fundamental categories, Swatantra and Partantra. Swatantra is independent reality, and only Vishnu is Swatantra. Everything else is Partantra, dependent reality. Partantra is then divided into Bhava, that which exists, and Abhava, non-existence. Abhava is further classified as Pragbhava, the absence of something before its production, Dhvamsabhava, its absence after destruction, and Atyantabhava, absolute absence. Bhava is divided into Chetana, conscious reality, and Achetana, non-conscious reality. The conscious beings include Vishnu and the various Jivas. These conscious beings are further distinguished as Kshara and Akshara. Kshara refers to beings whose bodies are perishable, including Brahma, Shiva, other deities, and ordinary embodied Jivas. Akshara refers to Lakshmi, whose body is imperishable. Vishnu is superior to both, possessing independence, knowledge, power and bliss without limitation. The Jivas themselves are also classified according to their condition. Nityamuktas are eternally liberated beings who were never bound by samsara, while muktas are souls who attained liberation after having been bound. Amuktas remain unliberated and are further divided into Muktiyogya, who are fit for liberation, Samsarayogya, who remain in samsara, and Tamo-yogya, who are destined for darkness. This forms part of Madhva's doctrine of Tartamaya, the real gradation among conscious beings. The Jiva is also a genuine agent. It can make choices and perform actions, but its agency remains dependent upon Vishnu. Its swabhava, or intrinsic nature, and its accumulated karma influence its actions, while Vishnu alone possesses completely independent agency as the Swatantra. The other side of Bhava is Achetana. This includes realities such as Prakriti, Kala, the Vedas, the mind, intellect, senses, pranas, elements and gunas. Some are eternal, while others are produced and undergo change. Of these, Prakriti is especially important because it provides the material basis for the manifested universe. In its unmanifest state it is called Avyakta, with the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas and Tamas, in equilibrium. When creation begins, Prakriti undergoes real transformation. From Avyakta comes Mehet, from Mehet comes Ahamkara, and from Ahamkara arise the Indriyas and Tanmatras, from which the five gross elements develop. This is Satkaryavada, the effect already exists in its cause before manifestation. Madhva describes creation as parinama, or a real change of state. The manifested universe therefore arises through the transformation of what was already present in Prakriti. Vishnu is the Nimitta Karana, the efficient cause of creation, preservation and dissolution. Brahma creates the universe, but this creative activity occurs through Vishnu's governance. Thus the material basis of creation is Prakriti, while Vishnu is its supreme efficient cause and Brahma carries out the creative function. At Mahapralaya, the manifested universe is withdrawn, and Narayana alone remains before creation begins again. Since these different realities genuinely exist, Madhva also maintains that their differences are real. This is the doctrine of Panchabheda, the five beginningless differences, Jiva, Ishvara, the difference between soul and God, Jada, Ishvara, between matter and God, Jiva, Jiva, between one soul and another, Jada, Jiva, between matter and soul, and Jada, Jada, between one material entity and another. For Madhva, these differences are not temporary appearances. They belong to reality itself. This is also central to his rejection of Advaita. Madhva asks who actually undergoes transmigration. If it is Shuddha Brahman, then Brahman itself becomes the subject of bondage and suffering. If it is instead a distinct jiva, then the jiva cannot simply be identical with Shuddha Brahman. Madhva also rejects explaining this distinction merely through upadhi, or limiting agents, raising the problem of anyonashraya, mutual dependence. The distinction between jiva and Brahman therefore has to be a genuine one. This distinct jiva is ultimately seeking moksha, which Madhva regards as the highest human goal. Moksha ends samsara and suffering and brings the highest happiness, but it cannot be attained independently. It requires the grace of Narayana. Knowledge therefore has a specific direction. Rather than realizing oneself as identical with Vishnu, one recognizes his supreme excellence. This produces devotion toward him, through which his grace leads the jiva to liberation. But liberation does not erase the individual soul. The mukta remains a conscious individual, with knowledge, perception and the ability to experience bliss and directly see God. The liberated soul is free from suffering and attains immense bliss, but does not acquire Vishnu's unique powers of creation, preservation and destruction. And now friends, we move on to what are death blows for Dvaita from its own positions. The first objection concerns Madhva's claim that bheda, or difference, is intrinsic to an entity. Madhva calls bheda an antaranga dharma, meaning that it belongs to the very nature of the thing itself. He does this to avoid the problem of anyonasraya. Understanding the difference between two things seems to require already knowing those things as distinct, while knowing them as distinct seems to require bheda. His response is that an entity and its bheda are apprehended simultaneously, but this does not establish that bheda is intrinsic. At most, Madhva has shown that when we apprehend an object, we can apprehend it as different from other objects. That is a claim about cognition. It does not prove that bheda is an intrinsic property belonging to the entity itself. The problem remains that bheda is still understood in relation to a dharma and a pratyogin, something is different from something else. Simply declaring that this difference is an antaranga dharma does not demonstrate it. So the argument fails to establish the very claim Madhva needs, that bheda is intrinsic rather than relational. The second objection concerns eternal damnation. Dvaita describes Vishnu as completely independent, all-powerful, and possessing infinite auspicious qualities. At the same time, Vishnu controls the entire operation of dependent reality, creation, preservation, dissolution, bondage, liberation, happiness and suffering. The jivas initially are blank but given svabhavas by Vishnu. The mukta yogya are predestined to be liberated while samsara yogya are to cycle forever and the tamo-yogya are eternally damned. This creates a twofold problem going beyond the standard problem of evil. In effect, Vishnu himself is imbuing jivas with evil and being unable or unwilling to change svabhavas for no purpose. All to preserve the sovereignty of Vishnu over all else.